Good morning, students. Today we are learning about the 3.6, the merchant of the Venice. First, I will read this story, and then will I give you explanation about this story. Antonio was the merchant who was lived in the Venice, the prosperous city in the Italy. In those days, this is about 500 years ago. Sea voyages were dangerous, and yet some adventurous merchants traveled across the sea. Some others spent lot of money in sending ships to faraway country. This ship brought back spices and other treasures from India and other countries to merchants sold them this Europe. They made a lot of profit in this business. At that time, when the story begins, Antonio was waiting for his ship to return with the merchandise. He had put almost all his money in ship. Antonio was a kind man. He had many friends, but his best friend was Bassanio. Bassanio was a young and handsome nobleman, but unfortunately he had no money. Bassanio wanted to marry Portia. Portia was beautiful and intelligent. She was only daughter of very wealthy man. Her father had debts, leaving her the large estate. In this will, Portia's father had written how Portia's husband should be selected. He had set a test for her suitors, and they had choose between three caskets. One is gold, one was silver, and one was lead. Each casket had something written on it. One of the gold casket, it was written, "Whoever chooses me shall gain what many we desires." On the silver casket, "Who chooses me shall get much as deserve." On the casket leads, "Who is choose me, give me the hazard all it has." One of the Portia's suitors was the princess of Morocco. He chose the gold casket, but when he opened this casket, the message inside said that it was not a right casket. All that glitter is not gold. Another suitor, the prince of the Orgons, chose the silver casket, but that too was not a right casket. Bassanio wanted to try his luck with the casket. To do that, he had travelled the Belmonts where Portia lived on her estate. He needed money for that. When Antonio came to know this, he wanted to help. He told Bassanio's and borrow money in his Antonio's name. They went to Shylock and the Jewish moneylenders and asked him for money. Shylock had a lot of money, but he was not all generous. Money was all that he cared for. He did not like Antonio because Antonio sometimes lent people money without charging an interest for it. So Shylock decided to get advantage of this situation. He gave them money and strange condition. If Antonio failed to return his money with 3 months, Shylock would cut off pounds of Antonio flesh. Antonio agreed to this and borrowed the money for Bassanio. Bassanio went to the Belmont. When he saw the casket, he chose the lead one. That was the right casket, and Bassanio owns Portia's hand. By choosing it, Portia too was glad to marry Bassanio's. That means in this story, the story name is the Merchant of the Venice. Merchant, you know merchant? To Vyapari in Marathi. Antonio was the merchant who lived in a Venice, in a prosperous city. That means a rich city, or in prosperous means to major city. How many characters in this story? Antonio, Bassanio, Portia, then Shylock. uh, Antonio was the merchant who lived in the Venice. The second is the Portia. Bassanio, Portia, then Shylock. This is the character in this story. Start story. Antonio was a merchant who lived in the Venice, the prosperous city in the Italy. In those days, that is 500 years ago, sea voyage were dangerous. That means the story takes place before the 500 years ago. The Antonio was the merchant and who is lived in the major city in the Italy, and at the 500 years ago, which that time sea voyage is very dangerous for everyone, and yet some adventurous merchant travel across the sea. But some adventure some merchant who was doing travels across the sea. Some others spent a lot of money spending ship to far west country. That means the many of the merchant who is the spend her money to sending his ship one country to another country. This ship brought back species and other treasures from the India and other countries. That means this ship who is the bring back up many species and the other treasure from the Indias and other countries. The merchant sold them things in Europe. That means the merchant who was sold these things in the Europe, and they made a lot of profit in this business. That means the मर्चंट काय करत होते, तो खजिना ट्रिजर्स किंवा मसाल्याचे पदार्थ काय करत होते, युरोपमध्ये सोल्ड करत होते आणि त्याच्यापासून काय करत होते, मेड अप लॉट ऑफ प्रॉफिट इन दिस. The merchants sold them things in Europe. They made a lot of profit in this business. At the time when the story begins, Antonio was waiting for his ship to return with the merchandise. He had put almost all his history in the story takes place, or this story begins with Antonio was the merchant in the Venice who was waiting for the ship to return with merchandise. He had put almost all his history in the ship. That means at that time the merchant of Venice, who is the merchant of the Venice, the Antonio was the merchant of the Venice. The story begins with the Antonio was waiting for the ship to return with the merchandise. He had put almost all his money in the ship. That means the merchant who was sold these species and the other treasures from India, and they sold in the Europe, and they get a lot of profit in this business. Antonio was a kind man. He had many friends, but his best friend was the Bassanio. Bassanio was a young and handsome nobleman, but unfortunately he had no money. That means Antonio was the kind man, and he had he had many friends, but his best friend was Bassanio. That means Antonio was a kind man. That means Antonio was also merchant, but this Antonio was the kind man, and he has many friends, but his best friend name is the Bassanio. Who is the Bassanio? The friend of the Antonio. Best friend of the Antonio is the Bassanio. Bassanio was a young and handsome nobleman, but unfortunately he had no money. Bassanio was the younger man who is the friend of the Antonio, and he is also younger man and handsome nobleman, but unfortunately he had no money. That means Bassanio was a poor man. Bassanio wanted to marry Portia. Bassanio wanted to marry with a Portia. Who is the Portia? Portia was a beautiful and intelligent. Portia is the lady who is the very beautiful and intelligent. She was only daughter of the very wealthy man. That means the Portia is a daughter of very wealthy man. Her father had died, leaving her large estate. That means Portia was the daughter of the wealthy man, and her father had dead and leaving her a large estate. You understand? who is the Antonio, who is the Bassanio, who is the Portia. Main character in this story is the Antonio, who is the merchant in the uh, Venice, in prosperous city in the Italy. Then second most important character in the story is Bassanio. Bassanio was the young and handsome man who is the best friend of the Antonio. And third character is the Portia. Portia was a very beautiful and intelligent girl, and she was the only one daughter of the wealthy man, and her dad was dead and living for a large estate. In this will, Portia's father had written how Portia's husband should be selected. That means her her father's leaving large estate for the Portia's, but her fathers had written how Portia's husband should be selected. म्हणजे पोर्शियाचा हजबंड कसा सिलेक्ट करायचा ते त्यांनी काय केलं होतं, तो क्रायटेरिया त्यांनी काय केलेला होता, राईट करून ठेवलेला होता. ही हॅड सेट अ टेस्ट फॉर द suitors. They had no choose between three caskets, one of the gold, one is silver, and one of the leads. That means they had choose between the three caskets. That means they choose the three caskets. One is gold, one is the silver, and one of the lead. That means they selected three caskets. One is the gold, one is the silver, and one is the lead. Each of the casket has something written on it. On the gold casket it was written, whoever choose me the shall gain what many desire. On the silver casket, who choose me shall get much as a desire. On the casket of lead, who choose me must give and hazard all of has. That means the three casket and something right on this casket. First is the gold casket. On this casket written, it was written, shall gain, who choose me shall gains many desires. That means at that gold casket, on this casket written, who choose me shall me get what many desire. On other silver casket, on this casket written by, who choose me shall get much as a desire. And on the casket of lead, who choose me must give and hazard all he has. One of the Portia's suitor was the Prince of Morocco. That means the Portia's suitor first is the Prince of the Morocco, who choose the gold casket. That means the Morocco prince who is the choose the gold casket. But when they open the casket, म्हणजे ज्यावेळेला मोरॅको प्रिन्सनं काय केली, ती गोल्ड कॅस्केट चूज केलं, त्यावेळेला त्याच्यावरती काय केलं, ती ओपन केली. ओपन दी कॅस्केट, द मेसेज इनसाइड that it was not right casket, all that glitter is not gold. That means this casket, that means at that time the Morocco opened this casket, and the message inside in that, and this is it is a not right casket, all things glitter is not gold. म्हणजे प्रत्येक चमकणारी वस्तू काय नसते, गोल्ड नसते, असा मेसेज त्यामध्ये लिहिलेला होता. अनदर suitor, the Prince of Organs. Then another suitor of the Portia is the Organs, and Organs choose this silver casket. This Organ, who is the prince, who choose the silver casket, but that too was not a right casket. This is this casket also not a right casket. Bassanio wanted to try his luck with the casket. That means the Bassanio who is wanted to try this luck with the casket. To do that, he had traveled the Belmonts where the Portia lived on her estate, and Bassanio wanted to try this luck, and he goes to the Belmonts, there where the Portia lived with her estate. He needed money for that, and at that time he needed money for that. When Antonio come to know this, he wanted to help, and at that time he want to help of Antonio, and he know he wanted to help. The told Bassanio borrow money in his name. That means they told Bassanio to borrow money his, that means his means Antonio's name. They went to Shylock, the Jewish moneylenders, and asked him for the money. And he goes to Shylock. Shylock is the character in the story, the man who was a very Jewish moneylender, आपण म्हणतो की नाही कर्ज देणारा, and asked him for money. That means at that time the Bassanio goes to Shylock and ask him for the money. You understand this story? Next part of the story we will learn about the next part of this story. Thank you.